Hey everyone, I'm Ethan, and today I'll be showing you how to build an AI agent based on integration data powered by Paragon workflows. So the demo I'll do today is based on Shopify. We're going to make an AI agent that connects to a Shopify store and is able to answer customers' questions about different products. So I have a example Shopify store here. It's preloaded with some example products, some basic things that you might find in a grocery store. And so what I want to do is basically open this data up to my AI agent to answer questions about it. So to go over the architecture just a little bit before we dive into the code, first we'll have an ingestion workflow. And essentially what will happen is the agent will allow the user to connect their Shopify account via Paragon. Paragon will render a component inside of the app that allows their user to approve their Shopify account for access. Once we have access to that user's Shopify account via Paragon, we can automatically run a Paragon workflow to get all of the products associated with that Shopify store and sync them back to the shopping agent. The shopping agent will then chunk and index those records and send it to a vector DB to allow for semantic search over some of those product descriptions. The next pattern we'll show you is one called a function call. For example, when a user requests information about a particular product, the shopping agent can do a couple things. One, it can go out to the vector database to run a semantic search over the user's query and get back the actual product record that we've indexed in the prior ingestion workflow. And then secondly, it can go ahead and call a function, in this case a workflow, in order to get real-time integration data back and inject it into the context for further answering in the query. So there are two workflows that we're going to implement in summary. One is a get all products workflow, which will be used for ingestion, for funneling everything into a vector database. And secondly, a function call workflow or a tool workflow that will allow our agent to get integration data in real time. In both cases, Paragon is managing the authorization and the API calls that are required here. So all of the refresh token management is automatically handled by Paragon. So let's go ahead and take a look at the workflows. So here's my Shopify integration in Paragon here. You can see the two workflows that I was referring to, get all products and get product inventory. So I'll open get all products, and here's what the workflow looks like. Firstly, it's triggered by an integration enabled trigger, which means this will run for all Shopify users once they've connected their account. Next, it will get all products in the Shopify store. For each of those products, it's going to fan out over that list of products and format it as a special string. I've gone ahead and formatted this string using a JavaScript function step, which we support in workflows for custom logic like this. And I'll go ahead and inject the description, the vendor, and the product ID into the document, which will be used to index into the vector database. And then finally, after I've formatted all of those documents based on Shopify products, I've pointed this to my local server, which will be an upload endpoint that will send it to my vector database. So what this request step points to is essentially the collection of documents that we fanned out over, and it will contain all of those formatted strings that I generated in the previous step. So let's go ahead and see this workflow in action. Here's my shopping agent right here, and you can see that I have the ability to connect my Shopify account. This is the component that I was referring to earlier called the connect portal. It allows our user to connect their Shopify account. So I'll go ahead and disconnect and refresh here so you can see the authorization flow from beginning to end. A new user will go ahead and click connect on their Shopify integration. They'll go ahead and type in their Shopify store name, and it will present an authorization prompt to make sure that the user grants the permissions that are necessary for the Shopify account. In this case, I already granted those, so it didn't prompt me, but I've gone ahead and gotten access to my Shopify account. I've successfully connected to this account. And now if I go back to the Paragon dashboard, you'll see that the get all products workflow has started running. So the workflow is now executing over all of the records in my Shopify account, formatting all of those documents according to the product descriptions. And eventually it will get to the index all products step and send that to my vector database. On the back end of this is a function that I've created, which will receive all of the upload payloads as a string array, and then run it through an embedding model. I'm using Nomic embed text, and then it will send it to my vector database, which is a pinecone index. So it went ahead and finished indexing all my products. So those are now available in my vector database as individual documents. Great. So that is the ingestion workflow. I've gone ahead and successfully indexed all my products in a vector database. And now I'll show you how that's leveraged once we go ahead and use the function call workflow. So now I'm going to give you a quick tour of the function call workflow and how exactly it works. I'll go back into my Paragon dashboard, visit the Shopify integration, go to Get Product Inventory. So this is a different kind of workflow. It's not triggered by integration enabled, it's triggered by request. Request will receive one query parameter, and this will kind of be like a required argument for invoking this workflow/function. And this parameter will be a product ID. The product ID refers to the ID of the product in Shopify. So if I open an example of one of these products, this is the ID that's being tracked by Shopify. That's sort of the internal ID that we're using here. I have an ID validation here just to make sure that the agent is passing me in a correctly formatted ID. And with that ID that we receive in the request trigger, I'll actually use the get products action from our Shopify integration, which means that it will go ahead and get all the product details by this ID that I pass in. I'll then format the response. In this case, this workflow is designated to get product inventory. So the response to this workflow is going to be formatted as some context about the inventory itself. So finally, it will respond in JSON, and that will be the answer to the query. So now let's go ahead and see how I expose this to my agent as a tool. So you can see here that I'm using Llama Index in order to actually provide the tool to my agent. And they have an abstraction called function tool, which allows me to describe a function that the agent should be able to use, describe the parameters that the agent should look for and pass into the tool, and then describe what the tool does, like when we should invoke this tool and what it means. So what I did here is I went ahead and implemented this function tool as get product inventory, which can get real-time inventory information for a product by its ID. And what it does here is it sends that request, and this request URL is a special URL that hits the workflow on behalf of the particular user that connected their Shopify account. And so basically what this does is once it knows that we need to get real-time product inventory, it receives that product ID based on the query information that we have available, and then reaches out to the workflow to actually get the Shopify details of the information that's required. So in this case, in order to get the real-time inventory for a particular product, we're going to call this workflow and then respond in line so that the agent can continue answering the response. All right, so let's go ahead and put it all together and see it in action. So I'll go back here into my shopping agent UI, and I can start by saying something like, how many bok choy are left? And so what will happen behind the scenes here as this is loading up? I'm running the agent locally, so it may take a little bit of time, but essentially what's happening is, once we ask for how many bok choy are left, it's going to go ahead and search my vector database first for bok choy using a semantic search. Once it gets the record of the product ID from the vector database, it's going to go ahead and use that product ID to invoke the get product inventory function. And that function is going to give it the answer to the inventory information, which is 60 bok choy are left. I can verify in my Shopify dashboard that that is correct. There are 60 available. And the nice thing about this tool workflow is that it's actually fetching real-time information. So if this all of a sudden needed to get adjusted by 2, we needed to update that quantity, we can go ahead and ask it again. And it should pull in the relevant new information based on the same product ID. So you can see the agent using the tool if you go ahead and look in the task history. This interface is a great way for you to see how the agent is invoking the workflow tools and then adjust your workflow accordingly so that it provides more helpful responses. And now I can see that the agent has responded that there are 58 bok choy left, which is correct, and it has successfully fetched the real-time information back based on the updates that I just made. So that's a quick basic overview of how you can use workflows with AI agents and to get integration data injected into the context so that your agent can answer with all of the information that it needs based on integration data. And hopefully this is helpful, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.